Hello and welcome to this episode of the Testing Peers. Tonight I'm joined by all four of the Testing Peers, with David.
Hello.
Russell.
Hello.
Chris.
Ahoy.
And myself, Simon. We are delighted to be sponsored by Saffron QA. Saffron QA are specialists in testing and recruitment, and they provide a range of bespoke recruitment services to organisations across the UK. For further details about Saffron QA, please see the show notes or visit saffronqa.co.uk. Tonight, we are going to be talking about building communities of practice.
I've been on holiday, which obviously is amazing. And I've been out and about just cycling around. And the one thing that cycling allows me to do is eat cake. So my question is around cake for you guys, because I find it's an important part of life. So my question to you is, if you could have any cake without worrying about the calories, because I know we worry about calories, what cake would you have?
What time of day are we talking?
Oh, does it change depending on the time of day?
It does.
Interesting. Then for you, Chris, lunchtime, late afternoon, and also evening. You've got 3 cake periods.
Jaffa cake at lunchtime. It's a cake. It's gone through the courts. It's cake. Then I'd probably say like a lemon drizzle. Proper lemon drizzle. Mwah. Then maybe like later on in the evening, maybe like a chocolate fudge.
For me, it's almost always a fruit cake. And it's usually around traditional times of the year. So Christmas cake, that's a good one for me. This Easter, we had Seminole cake because of the marzipan as well. That's always nice, similar to the Christmas cake. I would also be partial. There's a theme here about almonds. I like a Bakewell tart. That's always nice. And then a bit more healthy flapjack.
That's more debatable as a cake than a Jaffa cake.
It's a tray bake. Well, you could claim that a Bakewell tart isn't because it's a tart. But anyway.
Are we sticking to strictly cakes here, or are we allowed other sweet confectionery type stuff?
Close to cake as possible. It will be arbitrated by Chris.
Why, Chris? Of all of us to arbitrate it, really?
I know. That's why I picked Chris.
So, I mean, my cake-like snacks that I like, I would say brownies, particularly salted caramel brownies. I'm quite partial to a Krispy Kreme, especially the Biscoff biscuit ones.
See, now that's a donut. That's definitely not a cake.
Well,
it's more of a bread,
cakey,
isn't it? It's more of a bread than a cake.
I would also say a nice piece of chocolate fudge cake warmed with a piece of ice cream on the side would suit the.
How would you warm it, though, Simon? Would you put it in the microwave or would you put it in the oven? How would you warm it?
I would microwave it.
Microwave it.
I've never got warm cakes. This is something I just don't
What
get.
about like a sponge pudding?
Mine probably most popular would be a chocolate eclair with lashings of cream.
That's not cake.
Ooh.
It's a cream cake.
He's found a way in with the words.
It's more cake than donuts.
That's debatable.
Screw community practice. Let's get to the bottom of this cake stuff.
Yeah.
It's the first disagreement we've had.
Anyway, eclairs are good, yeah?
And then after that, it'd be cheesecake. A good New York cheesecake is amazing.
So what did you have after your cycle today?
I had a brownie.
So not a cake.
Correct. I also had some handmade chocolates and other things because I really spoilt myself. But I was dreaming of cakes. I really wanted a chocolate eclair with cream, but I couldn't find any that were good enough because there seems to be a shortage of decent chocolate eclairs. So if any of our listeners know of any good mail order chocolate eclairs with cream, do let me know.
Well, we're going to be celebrating some big birthdays later this year. Perhaps we need to know what cakes are important for those.
Well, this was partly my secret plan. So now we know what
secret plan.
Yeah, good one. Very good.
It's not a secret anymore because I just let the cat out of the bag.
Yeah.
But anyway, communities of practice. So I think between us, we've had a bit of experience building them. So I think it's a really interesting topic to talk about today, about how we'd go about building, or some tips and tricks and ideas for building a community of practice. Should we start with defining what community of practice means to us?
It's a good way of starting.
I've got Lee Rathbone's article on community of practice just open. Who'd have thought? He's got a little intro that says community of practice are groups of people that share a concern, a set of problems, or a passion about a topic, and who deepen their knowledge and expertise in this area by interacting on an ongoing basis.
So can I be controversial?
No,
I'd say I'm not 100% certain I agree.
that wasn't his definition. He had lifted that from Tinterwebs.
I'm not sure I agree with Interweb. Mainly around the one word practice. I guess what that means. To me, a practice is different from community of interest.
So it's a verb, it's a doing thing, right?
Yeah, so it's something that you need to be wanting to be involved in doing, which I think is important. Now, I think it's ambiguous, and I think it is used across both purposes, but I think it's something to call out because I think there's a community of interest, which is just people interested in, say, testing or development or front-end engineering or anything else. And there's people of practice where I would normally consider that to be people that are involved in doing. It's not always the case, but I think it's good to be clear when you're setting these up so that people can get involved. And it's possibly good to be clear with the way you advertise if you want a broad, not just testers to be involved in your testing one. Then think about what you really want to call it, community practice or not.
I would suggest that in my experience, a community of interest can turn into a community of practice though, because you've got people that are interested. You can then set some kind of, once you've got over the initial forming and norming of the community, you can then start to put, okay, let's try and think of something that we can actually do to improve the practice in the organization and get people all driving together towards that. But I agree, there is a difference. And I've always shied away when I've set them up. I've shied away from calling them communities of practice. I've usually gone with test chapter or something of just the word community, so that it's just a network of people that are interested in what we do rather than calling it a community of practice.
I think that's a much more valuable thing, a community versus interest practice or one thing else.
I think that sometimes people do have an issue with the community of practice sort of label, as we've discussed in various other episodes of giving things labels. But I think that it's I agree with Russell, it's the practice, it's the actual doing of building testing within a company. And it's that community feel where it's shared ownership. So therefore, it isn't just one person dictating what should happen. It's a collective agreeing what should be done. And I think that's the difference again with the sort of interest groups. People can be interested in it but not actually be practicing it, so they actually need to have some input into it and actually have an active role as part of it. And it can be very simple things through to much more complex things, but you don't necessarily need to give it a label. It just needs to have that cadence and that community spirit and people actually actioning their behaviors.
Do you think a community practice can exist outside of your workplace, or do you think it's something that our experience is more something that's been just in our own workplace?
I think it can definitely work outside it. I think a lot of meetups and those sorts of things are almost a community of practice or a community of interest.
I would agree with that.
I think communities are really, really big and really, really important. And this group, us, we're a community. We may be on Slack, we also have a podcast, but we're a community in itself. I think communities as a whole are a great way of learning, sharing, exchanging information.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think you're right. Meetups definitely were my first venture into communities and building that community from the ground. The intention was, I know Russell's talked about what his meetup did previously with the whole syllabus and trying to get people into testing. That kind of aim was my aim from a community perspective of building a practice that gave people the skills to learn more and then want to take that into a workplace. And I think generally the community as a whole could be seen as one big community of practice. You look at what Ministry of Testing are doing and Testim and others, their communities are all about empowering more people to learn new things, to build new practices and better people, which could be argued is what a community of practice is there to try and do, whether it be internally or externally.
I think the important thing about the community of practice is it's the shared nature of it. So if people are involved in meetups and other community things like Ministry of Test, then they need to share that back with the other people. It's a shared knowledge. And if people have don't have that idea of actually sharing or having input, then the whole idea of the community practice sort of breaks down a little bit, because it needs to have that shared thing. So even if you do send someone on a course or whatever, it's what information can they bring back and then act on it. And it's finding the possibility of using ideas within the workplace. They may not always work successfully, but it's making sure that the opportunity is there and it's a sort of collective agreement.
One thing I'm conscious of seeing in some places I've worked, communities of practice or communities aren't a line manager telling people what to do and how to do things. That isn't a community of practice. That's a team meeting or a instructional basis. It's going to have a different purpose. It's going to be led, and it's not going to have the same effect. You're not going to build people empowered.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because a lot of times, especially in the workplace, people will look to a manager to start stuff, and communities may well have natural leaders come in and take it. Not people who maybe are explicitly a leader, but maybe people who have got a drive and a desire to make a change, bring something in. And starting a community practice or starting a community can be a huge risk and can be quite a drain on the people that want to do it. So has anyone got any sort of stories, things to sort of say about where they've started one and how they approached it, and any sort of successes or failures that we might have had?
I've started a community of some kind in all three of my last roles, including my current role. And the more success, well, to start with, the first one I did, I tried to bring together all the testing teams and people from the testing teams within the UK-based offices for the cybersecurity company. And I started by reaching out to all the leads to say, look, I'd like to bring us together and talk about different practices and stuff. But I was a lead at this point as well, and it did feel like we were driving it from the top. So then I started going out to some of the testers and people in the teams and said, look, I think it'd be really good if we start sharing this. What do you think? And tried to organically get them to be interested by sort of suggesting stuff and then letting them think about it and waiting for them to come back, and tried to let them be the ones that set the agenda for the meetings and not be all run by me. And I found that because I had this drive to make it work, I was always the first one there. I was always the first one to get people interested and coming along to it. I felt like I was doing a lot of the legwork myself. And the only way I broke that was by, to start with, getting some external people in to come and do some talks to interest people a bit more. And then people suddenly got a bit more energized about it. And then they started to wanting to be part of it and talk about it a bit more and share some of the stuff they're doing. So in my next two roles, I started by making the first session more of a, let's get a really, really good external speaker in. I've got Rob Lambert in one of my roles for the first one. And that was, everyone was like, wow, he's such an amazing speaker. We need to learn more about this. We need to do more of this. And it got people energized to want to talk about testing more and about building their careers and everything. And then the current one, I got Ronald Cummings-John in as well to do a talk. And I've had a speaker every month. And the other thing I've done is I've opened it up to wider than just the testers. So having it just to testers, you get a very bunkered down mindset of it's us against the world almost. Whereas if you invite the wider engineering practice across the company, you then get people that are interested in testing that aren't testers, or people that can advocate for testing and want to learn more about testing. And suddenly you're building that practice organically with people that want to learn more about testing and trying to help the testing teams further the awareness of testing. And it's organically, it is growing at the moment. I'm getting a lot of more interest now by inviting the wider teams than just sticking to the testers.
For me, when we first started, I wasn't actually a leader at that particular stage. There were two of us who were sort of in a senior position that we felt we wanted to do this sort of thing. And so when we started, we had this sort of unwritten rule as to how the meetings would take place. And so basically there wouldn't be an agenda. The ideas would come from the wider testing group. We would try and get people off their feet. There would be some activity of making sure that everyone was involved, so everyone had to speak at a certain point. And we never told the people in the meetings what that, but every time we planned it, it was that sort of thing. So although we ran it, it was always that collaborative type thing. And we did bring people in from company as well, to share ideas, but there was always a purpose as to where any idea that was discussed in that particular meeting could be used within the wider projects that we worked on. That's continued on. So, and actually I've stepped down from that when I became a group lead. It was one of the things that I asked someone else to do. So they've continued with that, because again, I want that separation of, it's, there's a separation from a more formal meeting where I'm telling them, and then the meetings where it's much more collaborative.
Makes sense. So I did something, I guess, with a lot of other people, I have to add, when I was with Sage, but it came kind of osmotically. So I had team meetings, which were dysfunctional, and I won't lie. And I ended up canning them because it became what I would call moan sessions, not productive, not useful, for the sake of it, that sort of thing. So I canned them, but I was looking for an alternative. And my team weren't necessarily engaged in trying to do anything alternatively to that, but another team in another area were the business. So somehow I got talking with John McGee, and I kind of volunteered to go along and do a talk on how we did things. And we kind of grew what was a local departmental sort of testing thing to being cross-departmental. A lot of it was led by John. And I kind of got on board with him, trying to help him, trying to push it, promote it, make it more global across the sort of company where we had lots of different people in different offices, promoting people into it, putting speakers forward to it, helping enable it rather than just speaking, attending it myself, showing visibility that I cared so that my team would care. We got some buy-in from our senior managers to help us organize a kind of global conference that allowed us to get, I think we had Lee Rathbone actually speak, been doing the blue pill, red pill talk, trying to trigger it off. But we got several hundred testers from around the world in our teams to kind of come onto this sort of afternoon of virtual conferences. But it also gave people internally to Sage an opportunity to speak, to talk, to share their knowledge, share their things and their ideas. And I think John's gone on, done a test bash talk now and other things and meetups. But it's creating a space that allows people that want to do it. And it's not about forcing the issue. It's about sharing things that can be quite useful, that may not be useful for everyone all the time. They're optional, but getting those sort of opportunities. It's just about, as a leader, trying to encourage this. And if it can happen organically, amazing, brilliant. I was lucky enough that I jumped on a bandwagon versus having to trigger that to start with. But if you find someone willing, encourage that creativity and help make it happen, I think is what I would say.
For me, it was quite interesting, because I didn't really know what I was trying to achieve when I sort of started trying to get our testers to talk to each other. I'd previously been in big test teams and had horrible test team meetings, much like probably what Russell had. Ones where it was led explicitly by one person and everyone else kind of sat there. In fact, David would have been at a couple. I just didn't feel like I wanted to be there, but I had to be. I did have some that were good and some good ideas, and that is what got me started on my sort of path towards being able to know who to talk to and where to find things and to sort of engage more with this as a career. But when I changed my job and I came in as a senior at one of my old places, we were very siloed as testers in different teams. We weren't sharing knowledge, we weren't sharing passion, we weren't building relationships, we weren't a community, but we were all a minority within our teams. I asked my manager if I could have some time aside every month when we could get together. He said, excellent. So I pitched just a really basic thing. You're all right to get together with all the other testers and we'll see how we go. And initially it was very much me facilitating, but the target of everything I was trying to do was to make sure that I wasn't the one doing all the talking. So I was searching for collaborative, interactive things, a different topic with a different style, with a different goal, different things to introduce new ideas, inviting others to do things. And from those things, we came up with ideas and said, oh, we'd like to try that. Like, I wasn't the first person in my company to know that TestSphere was a thing. But when I was the first one going to an MOT event where it was going to be sold, I went and bought them because one of my team said, oh, get some of those TestSphere cards. And, you know, and it was a place that was safe to come forward, to share ideas, talk about how things might work, and then to try and do them in our own place, but also to collaboratively come up with ideas and things that we wanted to do. It's why we did mob testing, and lots of cool things came out of them, and they were really enjoyable. If I have one regret, it was that I would probably say I was still the one running them most of the time. Whether or not that was because people felt it's easy, Chris can do it, they're all right, I can just turn up and it's fun. I'm saying my meetings were fun, but it meant that when I left, they struggled to run those meetings themselves, and for me as a leader, I feel like that's probably a failure on me, because maybe I found it too easy to just take things on and run it myself. Even though we defined things and ran things how we wanted to as a community, it was still me running them thereafter, or during.
Yeah, I I had similar as well. I mean, I had comments after I left McAfee where they said, oh, well, those meetings stopped because you were the driving force, you were the passion behind it. We liked being part of it, but no one was willing to take it over. And like you, I felt that was a failure on me as well for not finding enough people to pick it up. And that was partly a reason as well why I was willing to, a couple of years ago, to stop the MOT Bucks meetup as well, until I managed to find Stu as a co-host to pick it up with me, because being that sole person that is responsible for building a community and keeping it running and finding the speakers, finding the agenda items, finding the topics, it is draining. And, you know, I love building those events, and I love building the community of practice internally as well, and getting the teams to talk to each other. And the amount of times we'd find that two teams were doing their own automation for a very similar problem, where they could have shared libraries and shared setups and worked together. And actually that was one of my driving forces in the first place, to build the community of practice. And just having that feeling of getting the teams talking and sharing knowledge and working together on something cross continents, cross teams that wouldn't normally have any reason to talk to each other, but getting them to talk to each other from a testing perspective. Oh, you're using the same framework as we are, or we could be using the same framework. We're both developing it in Python. We've used this library, you've used that library. What can we do to work together on this? That was one of my sole focus points to start it in the first place. But in the end, what happened was, although it was successful, we had the meetings, I did still pick up the burden of putting it together, sending the meeting request out, organizing the meetings. I might not say anything in the meeting because it would all be agenda driven, and they'd have the topics they wanted to talk about. But it was generally something that I felt that I was responsible for.
Yeah, I must admit, when I found myself organising my own meetup, I think, as I mentioned before, the sort of testing folks, when I was doing it by myself, doing all the talks all the time, I struggled. I had to get people in to help do different bits of it. It made it a lot easier, even though I was still doing a lot of the organising. It wasn't much less effort, but it was a lot less stress, anxiety, pressure.
It's having that person to talk to about it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and also means that others want to do it. You're not plowing ahead and doing this thing by yourself. Actually, if others are invested and willing to try, actually, maybe what I'm doing is high value, it's worthwhile. And that helps kind of get rid of almost this imposter syndrome, or this kind of bias in your head that maybe what actually no one's helping because no one really values what it is you're trying to do. Anyway, that's a different subject for another day.
It's all linked though. So do we have any tips for anyone that wants to start a community of practice, or community full stop, internally or externally? What would we say?
Do it.
Would be
it's the first one. No, it's literally start.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all right.
Start with it. Start small. Have a small idea.
Absolutely.
Get some people on board that you can sort of pitch it to, prior to the meeting or the gathering, or have you got, try and use something like a charter to sort of outline what it is you're trying to do, what purpose it is. You've got be inclusive and not dominant. If you're meeting in person, bring snacks.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, cake.
People, honestly, legitimately, the rest of my company, they would always look enviously on at us having meetings where not only were we eating snacks, but we were laughing and having fun in meetings, and then we'd walk out still laughing and having fun and just dolling out the snacks, and then people were so like envious about it. And you're like, we bought our own snacks, and we're just enjoying our own company whilst doing stuff that's talking about things that we're interested in, enjoying our company and working with each other.
It takes a certain personality like Chris's in order to help make it such a fun meeting. I'm not sure I could get the same.
Yeah, no,
person.
you're right.
Well,
I was challenged at one of our meetings afterwards by someone who wasn't in the meeting, saying, "You seem to be doing a lot of these. Why are you having so many meetings where there seems to be blatant social activities going on, and you're eating cake and whatever else?" And it's like, we're learning. We're spending time learning from each other, and just being able to say that, they were like, "Oh, okay, fair enough." It was enough to stifle the attack almost.
Well, community is about relationships as well, isn't it?
Absolutely,
it's about common purpose, but it's about relationships. And if you don't get to know each other and enjoy your company, you're not going to work so well, or be motivated to work so well with those people as much.
Well, I think I take a phrase from Tristan Lombard: "You can automate your test, but you can't automate relationships." I think that is very true. You need to build those relationships organically. You need to find a way to make it enjoyable, help people learn, and help people want to be there.
And also allow everyone to have a voice. That's one of the key things is for me, is start small, but allow everyone there to be an equal. Split them into small groups so that you don't have one person dominating the whole meeting the whole time. Allow them, each particular group, to have a small chat about particular things and then feed it back. So therefore you can build small and everyone feels like they have an input into it. That's one of the things I would say.
I think it's key to have activities such as lean coffees or get a test fear deck and just use it as a conversation starter between, like you say, split into tables, split the deck into half, or how many people you've got. The other thing I would say about the voices, you're right, give everyone a voice, but all equally allow people to take their time to find their voice. Don't expect everyone to step up and talk on the first event. Give people chance to bed in. You may find the first couple of events it's the same 2 or 3 people that do all the talking. Yeah. But as you grow, as you find other ways to communicate, as you build momentum effectively, and you find ways to engage people, you will find more voices will come out, and you'll find everyone feels more comfortable speaking up, talking about stuff. It may be a test fear session where you suddenly find that someone has a real keen interest in exploratory testing because you're not doing exploratory testing and currently in your workplace, that's not something that's come out before. Suddenly they're really passionate talking about it. And you may find these are the little things that then ignite somebody, and you give them the encouragement in the community to go, well, come and talk about that. Come and tell us what you love about exploratory testing, or let's share your understanding. And it just helps build those relationships, build that confidence as a group, and give people to talk about things that they wouldn't usually find opportunities to talk about.
One thing you talked about earlier, Simon, which I think is actually quite often quite a good idea, especially depends on your company, but it's getting external people in. It's getting somebody in. Now, I can't speak for every speaker out there in this world, but I found the testing community very, very good at flexing their time, being helpful. Speak of mine, I'll speak of yours, or okay, yeah, you don't speak yet, but if you have something useful, come do it. And the managers I felt was like, well, how much budget do you want in order to get speakers in? Like, well, I've asked a few people and they wouldn't do it for free. And
yeah,
not saying everyone is
cakes.
yeah, but people are happy to share, to help learn, to give experience, to share knowledge. And I certainly know the testing community is good. Not everyone is. And if you go and reach out to somebody now and ask them to come speak at your event, I can't guarantee they'll do it for free. But if you try and ask, quite a lot will.
You're right. I did, like you did, you did your global conference. I did an internal conference as well, where the 50 plus internal testers came along to an afternoon of external speakers, and I had Lee Rathbone opening for me as well. So he did his mobile phone and his dead talk. So that's 2 links from Lee in the show notes.
3.
3.
This is
Okay,
blog
fair
post
enough.
as well. Hi, Lee.
Fair play. But I had Nikki Sedgwick and Christina Ohanian and Dan Ashby as well come and do talks, and every one of the 50 plus testers that were there took something different away from the afternoon. I managed to get the catering team to provide afternoon teas as well, so everyone was fed. It was we didn't pay the speakers, but I offered to return the favor and go and speak at anything they wanted to. And it's that kind of relation. There is that very much that feeling in majority of the testing community that, you scratch our back, we'll scratch yours kind of thing. Yeah, I definitely encourage, if you want to get it kick-started, find an engaging speaker. We've all said Lee, but there's others as well.
Please don't bombard Lee after this podcast goes on.
Or do.
To really sort of engage people, find someone that's got a topic that they're passionate about and let them talk about it, whether it's someone well-known or not. If they're passionate about it, they'll be able to engage people.
New voices can be stimulating.
Absolutely. Agreed.
But I guess the only other thing I would say on top of all of those golden nuggets is seek feedback.
Yes.
And act on those things. Whether that's, some people will be happy to give feedback in a wider forum or in a more retrospective-y type thing. But even one-to-one, just find out how people are. You don't have to be their manager. You don't have to be any of these things. But just chat to people. Say, how are you finding these meetings? Are there things you would change? That I had a colleague that I knew when they were not engaged. They had one of those faces, like David has right now, and and I knew that what I was doing wasn't engaging for them. And feedback's important, because there's no point in doing the same thing. Like, if your audience aren't interested in particular things, maybe don't do those unless it's important for your org that you do them. I think it's community practice. It's something that people have to buy into, so it shouldn't be mandatory. People have to want to be there for it to work. Those things need to happen. So seek that feedback, inspect, adapt, change.
It's almost like building a culture.
And I think that's a perfect ending to this episode. So thank you very much for listening, and thank you for all your input, Simon, Russell and Chris, tonight. Please do get in contact with us in various channels, either by email at contactus@testingpeers.com or through the normal media channels. That's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Or you can also help us to maintain our podcast for our patron at patreon.com/testingpeers. Finally, thank you very much for sponsors, Saffron QA, for their continued support. And I think that's the end of our episode tonight. So we look forward to inviting you back in a couple of weeks' time.
For now, it's goodbye from the Testing Peers.
Goodbye.